This really is a big change. I think that the BBC right now roughly has about 350 million people every week that see our content. That's a lot of eyeballs going to experience this new font. We wanted to try to pull together different functions across platforms, so across linear television and radio, as well as online. And so a font project really helped create a vehicle almost for a level of collaboration that perhaps has always been a bit of a challenge for us.
The typeface is called Reith. It's named after the BBC's original Director General, John Charles Walsham Reith, who was a British broadcasting executive who essentially came up with the concept of independent public service broadcasting. And the mission really was to educate the masses, educate people. And given that reading for most of us is an essential component of learning, of education, it made sense to use his name. Also, the name itself, Reith, has a certain elegance to it, so it works on a number of levels.
BBC content exists both on our own estate but also elsewhere. Our television programmes appear on other aggregation providers like Netflix and Amazon, places like that. And then our online content increasingly is appearing in social media. So really having something that is a BBC stamp is actually a really important thing for us to be doing.
All brands need to evolve and continually update their identity to make sure that they continue to look and feel relevant. The landscape in which we work is quite different now. We're much more of a digital brand than we ever have been. But when you shrink down type so that it works in digital spaces, very small digital spaces, it was quite difficult to make our current fonts work. We also knew that legibility would be really important for accessibility. As the nation's public service broadcaster, we have to be accessible to everyone.
As an organisation transforming to become more digitally fit, internet fit, all those things, we need to move with the times, we need to appeal to as many people as possible and to have a different range of expression, have a range of tonality. I guess my role in the creation of Reith was bringing together all the numerous stakeholders across the organisation to understand the benefits to our licence fee payers and to the organisation itself of having our own typeface at the BBC. There was an opportunity to improve legibility, save money, and to increase our range of expression.
The BBC estate is so huge that trying to make sure you're developing your brands and your branding in a way that it all hangs together is quite tough. So there's a benefit to the consistency that the new font will give us.
This will underpin and inform whatever the next evolution of the BBC visual brand will be. And having Dalton Marg as our chosen typeface designers, we had the experts on hand whose rigour when it came to designing this was just wonderful.
Designing a typeface for the BBC is obviously the holy grail. Once you've designed for the BBC, you have achieved, particularly something so profound like as a typeface. The challenge was to be able to maintain the history and the tradition that the BBC has, but then also how do you combine that aesthetic quality with the very pragmatic needs of accessibility, where an 80-year-old has to be able to read that font as well as an 80-year-old. On one hand, it has to be aesthetically profound. On the other hand, it has to be utterly utilitarian, utterly usable.
The core theme of BBC Reith is accessibility. Reith has open proportions, but all the characters are open, and that's upper and lowercase, and that's a consistent approach across the whole set. If you imagine when these letters are used at small sizes, especially on screen when you're dealing with the limitations of a couple of pixels here and there, you're getting the maximum amount of legibility. Space is at a premium, so we have to make these characters open and accessible. The more air you can get in the middle of these characters, the better, really.
With the help of Dalton Marg, we learned so much about typography. We learned about individual character design and the beauty of typography, of type design, and the history of it as well, and how the brain cognitively loads it and processes words. So suddenly we had this family of stakeholders at the BBC who became their own individual ambassadors for typography, for the new BBC typeface. Seeing their faces light up when they're shown the latest work in progress from our type designers was just wonderful, because I expected it might be a much more challenging project trying to get people who don't design every day to consider design and design aesthetic of a typeface. but it wasn't.
It was really exciting and an unbelievable honour and a really unique experience for me to be part of the group working with Dalton Mag. One of the issues we had within the world of 24-hour rolling news is actually our on-screen architecture is quite crowded. When you think about it, we have tickers, which is the text with the stories running across the bottom. We then have names and designations, and also we put kind of facts and figures onto the screen, and we don't have much space. So in particular with other fonts, we had issues around descenders, which led to kind of difficulties with leading space between each of the lines. So we were quite limited. It was really quite tight of how big we could actually make the fonts on screen. So working with Dalton Mag, they actually designed this particularly cute queue that's got this delightful little horizontal tail. So none of it descends below the line, so we can actually make the font quite large. We're talking lines here, a few lines, but actually makes all the difference to how much information we can actually get on the screen and how legible it actually is.
First and foremost, it's about functionality. First and foremost, it's about conveying a message. I have to make sure people can read it easily, and I have to facilitate the act of reading. But I can also build in very, very subtle design features that make it look and feel like this is from the BBC. We've designed a G, which at the top hasn't got a spur, or B and D, the B as well terminates soft, it goes round into the stem, whereas on the D you have a little spur. And that again helps it to distinguish the two characters from one another, because quite often people with a reading disability often mistake BDPQ from one another. And just by adding these little touches of the design, you can create this ambiguity and help readers decode the letters easier. But it also functions as a design feature to create a certain amount of personality. So again, that makes it very distinct.
We made sure that when we were developing it, it was a broad enough font family that it had enough expression in it that it could be rolled out in lots of different places. What you don't want to do is, with an estate the size of the BBC, you don't want to roll out a font and then have everything look exactly the same because it's using exactly the same font. So we developed sans and serif typefaces, we developed lots of different weights so it can allow individual brand expression across the BBC's portfolio, and that for me is a really big benefit.
We live in quite a complex world, and we need to help the audience understand kind of really complicated and multi-layered stories. So the whole Reith font and the Reith family with all its different literations really allows us to help the audience understand the tone of where we come from. For instance, what would be appropriate for a royal birth, or what would be appropriate for maybe something like Brexit, will be quite different. Something like breaking news now is kind of quite exciting for us, and how we use the Reith to actually express that and to kind of get it really clear in a really crowded news marketplace is going to be quite an exciting challenge for us. This tonality of storytelling that we have, there's a lot of personality in that, and news without any doubt can use the whole of that personality for the audience's benefit.
The BBC internal design teams have done a great job using the typeface and making the most of the typeface as well, really working with it, so that it actually can deliver what it is supposed to deliver.
When it comes to implementing the font, that's going to have to be a BBC-wide collaboration, because we're effectively asking everybody to adopt it in the work that they do, from somebody designing a product through to any member of staff who's writing an email.
It says in the back of our badges, of BBC's badges, that things happen much better when we all work together, and I think that this font project has been a really tangible example of that happening in action.
The font that we have now is a contemporary humanist typeface which has a whole range of expression, which is very exciting. The typeface itself is made, we're delighted with it, it's beautifully crafted, it looks great, and every scenario that our designers are putting it into, it's working better. You're going to see Reith begin to appear in more and more of our services, online, on TV, in the real world, across the world. We haven't even touched the surface of all the possibilities of how it can express itself yet. This is early days. It's essential that it finds its own space, that it lives and breathes as a design element within our framework.
That day when you open up the BBC website and you go to the news section and it's there, that's what I'm really looking forward to. That's when you know, okay, we are there, we have achieved.
It's been really exciting. And legacy stuff, this is stuff that we'll look back on and say, well, we changed the typeface of the BBC. To many people that's not going to be a big deal, but to designers and for people that are interested in typography and people that are interested in digital transformation and all the things which it will benefit, this is fascinating and truly rewarding.